They say the humidity in New Orleans doesn't just stick to your skin, it sinks right into your soul. Lately, I feel like it's carrying the weight of unspoken words, clinging to me heavier than the summer air off the Mississippi. My name is Andrea, and for the better part of 30 years, this city, in all its beautiful, complicated glory, has been my home. It's seen me raise a family, build a life, or at least what looked like a life from the outside looking in. Living in the Garden District, even on the slightly frayed edges like we do now, comes with expectations, appearances. Lord, the appearances we keep up. It's a story, all right? One I never thought I'd be telling. But first, please like this video and subscribe if you enjoy these stories. It helps a lot. Thanks. Now, where was I? Oh yes, appearances. Benjamin, my husband. Well, he's always been good at those. Masterful even. Benjamin Moreau, third generation in his family's. Maritime logistics company down by the port. Sounds impressive, doesn't it? Moreau Shipping. It was impressive. There were years, not so long ago, when the biggest decisions were which Brennan's restaurant to celebrate at, or whether the Saints season tickets were worth the upgrade. We had comfort, security, or so I thought. Now the guilt is flaking. Off the frame, revealing something cheaper underneath. It started subtly. The excuses for late nights shifted from entertaining clients, always plausible in a city that runs on hospitality, to vaguer catching up on paperwork. The scent of his familiar sandalwood cologne was occasionally different. Not bad, just not him. Like trying on someone else's coat. Then came the whispers about the business. Not loud, never direct, but you hear things in New Orleans. It's a big city, but a small town in many ways. A nervous comment from a supplier's wife at the Rouse's market. A tight-lipped silence from an old friend when I asked how Moreau Shipping was really doing. Benjamin, when pressed, just waved it away. Cash flow, Ellie, just temporary cash flow issues. Nothing to worry that pretty head about. Patronizing? Oh, absolutely. But back then, I still wanted to believe him. It was easier. The house felt bigger, quieter. Our kids are grown and gone, scattered across the country, chasing their own dreams. Bless their hearts. But the silence they left behind used to feel peaceful. Now it echoed. We'd sit in the den, him scrolling endlessly on his phone. More work, he'd claim. Me pretending to read a book. The air thick with things unsaid. The budget got tighter. Not dramatically, not overnight poverty, but noticeable. My favorite Creole restaurant became an occasional treat. Discussions about that trip to Italy we'd always planned vanished, replaced by tense talks about property taxes and the rising cost of, well, everything. He blamed the economy, regulations, anything but his own management. There was always an external force, never an internal misstep. It's exhausting, carrying the weight of someone else's deflections. You start to feel complicit in the lie just by staying quiet. I remember one particularly sticky Tuesday evening. He came home late, smelling faintly of cheap perfume masked by expensive bourbon. Not the scent of his usual haunts, the Sazerac Bar or Arnaud's French 75. This was different. He mumbled something about a new hire, a young go-getter named Brenda? Barbara? Honestly, I barely registered it then. Just another name in the endless stream of business jargon he used as a shield. He tossed his keys onto the antique console table, a piece I'd lovingly restored years ago, with a carelessness that set my teeth on edge. He didn't meet my eyes, just headed straight for the shower. That night, lying in bed, the rhythmic hum of the ancient air conditioner couldn't drown out the buzzing in my own head. It wasn't just the finances anymore, was it? A deeper crack was forming, right beneath our feet, threatening to swallow the carefully constructed facade of Moreau. Perfection. The humidity felt less like weather and more like a warning. Something was wrong. Terribly, irrevocably wrong. And deep down, a cold dread started to whisper that maybe, just maybe, I didn't want to know what it was. But knowing, or not knowing, sometimes you don't get a choice. The truth, like the Mississippi River after a storm, has a way of overflowing its banks. The knowing I'd been subconsciously dreading didn't arrive with a bang, more like a sickening electronic chime. It was a Saturday morning, the kind where the lazy New Orleans heat already felt thick by 9 a.m. Benjamin was supposedly down at the docks, dealing with some phantom, urgent shipment issue. I was nursing a cup of chicory coffee, trying to reconcile our dwindling checking account balance with the grocery list in my hand. His laptop was open on the mahogany desk in the study. He'd been working late again. Usually, I wouldn't dream of looking. Privacy, respect, all those things. That felt increasingly like relics from a bygone era of our marriage. But a notification pinged, displaying a preview on the screen. Not an email, a messaging app he used for work. Or so I thought. The sender. Brenda J. The message preview, stark against the dark background. Last night was incredible, Benjamin. Can't stop thinking about you. Did Ellie suspect anything when you got home? Need to talk about that hotel charge again. My breath hitched. The coffee cup trembled in my hand, rattling against the saucer. Brenda J., not Barbara. Brenda. The go-getter he'd mentioned offhandedly weeks ago. Brenda Jones, his new executive assistant, barely 30. All bright lipstick and ambition I'd mistaken for professional drive when she was introduced at the company picnic last spring. Incredible? Hotel charge? Did Ellie suspect anything? The casual cruelty? Of it, the winking emoji. It was like a physical blow. The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet, the familiar pattern of the Persian rug swimming before my eyes. This wasn't a suspicion anymore. This wasn't a vague unease fueled by humidity and financial stress. This was cold, hard, digital proof of betrayal, delivered right to his screen, right into my life. For a moment, I just stood there frozen. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. 30 years of shared jokes, family dinners, hurricanes weathered together, quiet compromises, building something, or what I thought was something. Had it all been a lie? How long had this been going on? Was Brenda the first? The sheer number of questions that flooded my mind was overwhelming, each one sharper than the last. And the casual mention of a hotel charge. Was he using company money? Our money? The money we supposedly didn't have for a vacation, for repairs on the leaky roof for peace of mind? Fury, cold and sharp, began to cut through the shock. He came home around lunchtime, whistling, like any other Saturday. He dropped his briefcase by the door, loosening his tie, complaining about the heat and the incompetence down at the port. He poured himself an iced tea, oblivious. I watched him, my insides churning. Every gesture, every word, suddenly seemed grotesque, a performance for an audience of one he thought was still blissfully ignorant. How could I have been so blind? Were the signs always there, written in a language I refused to learn? I let him finish his tea. I let him settle into his armchair with the newspaper, the picture of oblivious domesticity. Then, I walked into the living room, holding his laptop. I didn't have to open it. I just held it. Benjamin, I said, my voice surprisingly steady, though my hands were shaking. Who is Brenda Jones? He looked up, startled. A flicker of something crossed his face. Annoyance? No, fear. Just for a second. Then the mask slammed back into place. My assistant, he said, trying for nonchalance, folding the paper deliberately. Why? Because she accidentally sent a message to your laptop instead of your phone, I replied, keeping my voice level. Something about how incredible last night was? And a hotel charge she needed to discuss? The color drained from his face. He opened his mouth, closed it again. The usual bluster, the practiced deflection, it wasn't there. He just stared at me, cornered. Ellie. It's a misunderstanding. Is it? I asked, the cold fury rising. Is asking if Ellie suspected anything a misunderstanding? Is using money we don't have on hotels with your assistant a misunderstanding? 30 years, Benjamin. Was any of it real? He stood up then, knocking the newspaper to the floor. Now, Ellie, don't be dramatic. It was a mistake. A stupid mistake. It didn't mean anything. Didn't mean anything? My voice finally cracked, rising despite my efforts. Sleeping with an employee young enough to be our daughter doesn't mean anything? Lying to me, day after day while our finances crumble, doesn't mean anything. Spending money on her. All right, he snapped, resorting to anger, his default defense. So I messed up. It happens. Men have needs. Things haven't exactly been exciting around here lately, have they? That stopped me cold. He blamed me. After the lies, the deceit, the potential embezzlement, he blamed me. The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. In that instant, whatever lingering hope I had that this could be fixed, salvaged, glued back together, it shattered, irrevocably. The pieces were too small, too sharp. Get out, I whispered, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. What? Don't be ridiculous, Ellie. This is my house, too. Get out, I repeated, louder this time, pointing towards the door. The storm that had been brewing inside me finally broke. Take your needs and your stupid mistakes and get out of my sight. Now. He stared at me, perhaps seeing something in my eyes he hadn't seen before. The compliance, the quiet acceptance. It was gone, replaced by a resolve that felt both terrifying and liberating. He hesitated, opened his mouth to argue again, then seemed to think better of it. He grabbed his keys from the console table, the one I'd restored, and walked out, slamming the grand old cypress door behind him. The sound echoed through the suddenly cavernous house. I stood there, alone, the laptop still humming faintly on the desk, displaying the ugly accidental truth. The air felt thin, hard to breathe. The humidity outside seemed to press in, but inside, all I felt was a chilling emptiness. The gilded cage had sprung open, and I was standing in the wreckage. The silence Benjamin left behind wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, charged, like the air before a Gulf Coast thunderstorm. In those first few days, I moved through our house. My house, I started correcting myself, like a ghost. One moment I'd be numb, staring blankly at the overgrown jasmine, threatening to swallow the back porch. The next I'd be sobbing over a chipped coffee cup we bought on a long-forgotten trip to Natchez. Anger was a constant companion, simmering just below the surface, occasionally boiling over when I found a stray sock of his under the bed or saw his smug face smiling from a framed photo. I took that photo down. It felt like the first real act of reclamation. Fear was there too, a cold knot in my stomach that tightened whenever I thought about the finances. Benjamin handled everything, always had. Don't worry your pretty head, he'd say. Now worry was my primary state of being. How bad was it? How much debt were we actually in? And the most galling question, how much of our dwindling resources had been funneled towards Brenda Jones and her incredible nights? My friend Genevieve, bless her pragmatic New Orleans soul, was my rock. Jen, who'd known Benjamin since college, never fully trusted his smooth charm. She arrived the day after he left, armed with café au lait, beignets, and the name of the sharpest divorce lawyer in the city, a woman named Simone Dubois, whose office wasn't in some sterile CBD high-rise, but tucked away in a beautifully restored Creole cottage in the Marigny. She eats men like Benjamin for breakfast, Cher, Jen assured me, squeezing my hand, and spits out the bones. Meeting Simone was bracing. She was impeccably dressed, sharp-eyed, and had absolutely no time for emotional hand-wringing. She listened intently as I laid out the story, her expression unreadable. When I got to the message from Brenda mentioning the hotel charge, Simone's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. Financial infidelity often walks hand in hand with the other kind, Mrs. Moreau, she stated calmly. We'll need full financial disclosure, bank statements, credit card bills, company accounts if we can argue commingling of funds. Expect resistance. Resistance was an understatement. Benjamin, through his own equally slick lawyer, stonewalled at every turn. He claimed poverty, blaming the economy, Hurricane Ida's lingering impact, anything but his own actions. He tried calling me, alternating between tearful apologies, I made a terrible mistake, Ellie, we can fix this, and veiled threats. You drag Moreau shipping through the mud, and there'll be nothing left for either of us. He even tried to turn the kids against me, painting himself as the victim of my unreasonable coldness. Thankfully, they knew their father well enough to see through it, though it hurt them deeply. The call stopped when Simone sent a sharply worded cease and desist letter. The process was ugly, dredging up years of financial statements. Simone's forensic accountant, a quiet man with an astonishing eye for detail, started finding things. Discrepancies, vague consulting fees, charges at boutiques I'd never heard of, expensive dinners coded as client entertainment on dates Benjamin was supposedly working late. And yes, hotel charges. Several, often coinciding with his business trips that never seemed to yield any actual business. Many linked directly to credit cards Brenda had access to as his assistant, supposedly for office expenses. The scale of it, the sheer brazen deception tied directly to our shared finances while he lectured me about cutting grocery costs. It made me physically ill. The climax, when it came, wasn't a dramatic public showdown, but something far more claustrophobic and revealing: the deposition. We were gathered in a sterile conference room at Benjamin's lawyer's firm downtown. Rain lashed against the windows, a typical New Orleans deluge turning the skyline into a gray blur. Benjamin sat across the table, looking pale and diminished, flanked by his attorney. Brenda Jones was there too, called as a witness regarding company funds. She avoided my gaze, nervously smoothing her skirt. Simone was relentless. Calmly, methodically, she presented the evidence. Credit card statements showing charges at Commander's Palace on nights Benjamin claimed to be working alone. Receipts from jewelry stores, the hotel bills. She questioned Brenda about her duties, her access to company funds, specific expenditures. Brenda stammered, contradicted herself, shot panicked glances at Benjamin. His lawyer objected constantly, but Simone expertly navigated the legal minefield. The turning point came when Simone presented an email chain, accidentally forwarded by Brenda herself to the company accountant, discussing the purchase of a ridiculously expensive designer handbag, charged to a Moreau shipping account. Brenda claimed it was a client gift. Simone raised an eyebrow. A client gift, Ms. Jones? For whom, precisely? Brenda floundered. I don't recall the specific client. Perhaps, Simone suggested silkily, because the client was you? And the authorization came directly from Mr. Moreau as a personal gift funded by the company? She produced another document, an internal expense authorization signed by Benjamin, poorly disguised. Benjamin slammed his hand on the table. This is harassment. This has nothing to do with the divorce. On the contrary, Mr. Moreau, Simone countered, her voice like ice. It has everything to do with the dissipation of marital assets, funds that should have belonged to the community estate, funneled into financing your extramarital affair while claiming financial hardship to my client. The room fell silent, save for the drumming rain outside. Benjamin's face was a mask of fury and humiliation. Brenda looked like she wanted the floor to swallow her whole. In that moment, seeing them exposed, stripped of their lies under the harsh fluorescent lights, something inside me shifted. The fear didn't vanish entirely, but the anger solidified into resolve. He wasn't just an adulterer. He was a cheat in every sense of the word, willing to ruin us both financially to feed his ego and desires. The guilt wasn't just flaking off, it was fool's gold underneath. There was no going back. There was nothing left to save. This wasn't just the end of a marriage. It was the unmasking of a 30-year illusion. And strangely, amidst the wreckage revealed in that stuffy, rain-streaked room, I felt the first, tentative flicker of freedom. Leaving that deposition room felt like surfacing after holding my breath underwater for far too long. The torrential rain had stopped, leaving behind that uniquely New Orleans aftermath: steamy air, glistening streets, and the smell of damp earth and possibility. I felt hollowed out, exhausted, yet strangely lighter. The truth, however ugly, was out. The fight wasn't over, but the worst of the unveiling was done. Benjamin looked utterly broken, his usual arrogance replaced by a slack-jawed disbelief. Brenda had scurried away like a frightened crab. Simone gave my arm a brief, firm squeeze. Good, was all she said. It was enough. The divorce itself dragged on for a few more months, a tangle of legal procedures and financial wrangling. As Simone predicted, there wasn't a vast fortune left. Benjamin's recklessness, combined with Brenda's expense account, had significantly eroded the Moreau shipping coffers and, consequently, our marital assets. He had to sell off a majority stake in the company to cover debts and the settlement, a move that apparently caused shockwaves down at the port. Moreau Shipping, a name synonymous with old New Orleans commerce, was effectively gutted, a shadow of its former self. The final decree arrived not with a bang, but with a quiet thud in my mailbox on a Tuesday morning. Holding that document, officially severing 30 years of shared history, felt surreal. No elation, just a profound sense of closure, tinged with sadness for the life I thought I had, but also a clear-eyed acceptance of the reality I now inhabited. The big house in the Garden District, once my pride and joy, now felt like an expensive, memory-laden albatross. Selling it was both heartbreaking and liberating. Saying goodbye to the camellias I'd nurtured, the porch swing where I'd rocked my babies. It hurt. But handing over the keys to a young, hopeful family felt like shedding a skin that no longer fit. Benjamin's trajectory, from what I heard through the grapevine, because New Orleans always talks, was less phoenix from the ashes and more slow-motion implosion. Brenda apparently hadn't signed on for the poorer part of for richer or poorer and vanished soon after the company's sale, reportedly heading back to somewhere less complicated like Texas. Benjamin rattled around in a much smaller, rented condo downtown. The Moreau name now whispered with pity or scorn, depending on who was talking. He tried projecting the same old charm, I heard, but it rang hollow. People saw through it now. There's a certain kind of loneliness reserved for those who burn all their bridges while convincing themselves they're building empires. He was adrift in the city he once felt he owned. Meanwhile, I found a charming little shotgun double over in the Marigny, just a few blocks from Simone's office and worlds away from the stifling expectations of Uptown. It needed work, but it was mine. Painting the walls a cheerful shade of apricot, planting herbs in window boxes, learning how to fix a leaky faucet myself. Thank you, YouTube. These small acts of creation felt monumental. I started managing my own budget, carefully navigating the settlement funds and a small part-time job I took at a local art gallery on Royal Street. It wasn't luxurious, but it was mine. The control, the independence, it was intoxicating after years of being financially sidelined. One sun-drenched afternoon, exploring my new neighborhood, I wandered into a small gallery showcasing local photographers. There was a stunning series capturing the quiet dignity of Mardi Gras Indians, the intricate beadwork gleaming under the gallery lights. Lost in thought, I almost bumped into a man studying the same photograph. He turned, smiling, apologetically. They're incredible, aren't they? The artistry, the dedication. He introduced himself as Charles Chenier. Older than Benjamin, perhaps early 60s, with kind eyes crinkled at the corners and a calm, steady presence. He wasn't flashy, dressed in simple linen, but there was an air of quiet confidence about him. We talked for nearly an hour, about photography, about the city, about the surprising resilience of ferns pushing through sidewalk cracks. He mentioned he was semi-retired from architectural restoration, focusing now on passion projects. He listened more than he talked, asking thoughtful questions, genuinely interested in my perspective. It was refreshing, a conversation that didn't revolve around appearances, complaints, or deflections. When I finally excused myself, he simply said, "It was a genuine pleasure talking with you, Andrea. No pressure, no pickup lines, just simple, human connection." Walking home under the crepe myrtle blossoms, a lightness filled my chest I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't about finding a replacement for Benjamin, not at all. It was about realizing I was still here. Andrea, not just Mrs. Moreau, the wronged wife, the divorcee navigating her 50s, just Andrea, discovering her own rhythm in the life. Heart of a city that, despite its own scars and struggles, always knows how to find its music again. Maybe, just maybe, I was finding mine too. Charles Chenier was just a brief, pleasant encounter, I told myself. But sometimes, the quietest notes are the beginning of a whole new melody. 2 years. Sometimes it feels like a lifetime ago, sometimes like yesterday, that I stood in that sterile conference room watching Benjamin's world crumble. 2 years since the final divorce decree landed in my mailbox, severing the old ties. The little shotgun double in the Meringue is no longer just a place I landed. It's home. The apricot walls are covered in art I love. The window boxes overflow with basil and mint, and the leaky faucet? Fixed it myself, though Charles still teases me about the YouTube tutorial incident. Charles Chenier, the kind-eyed man from the photo gallery. That chance encounter wasn't just a pleasant moment, it was the quiet beginning of everything. Our conversations became coffees, then dinners exploring tucked-away restaurants in the bywater I'd never known, evenings filled with laughter and jazz drifting from open doorways on Frenchman Street. With Charles, there were no masks, no pretenses. He loved the city's soul, its quirks, its history etched into the plaster and ironwork, much like he seemed to appreciate the lines etched on my own face. He never treated my past trauma as baggage, but as part of the journey that made me, well, me. He listened, truly listened. A revolutionary concept after 30 years of Benjamin's self-absorption. His success in architectural restoration meant, yes, he was comfortable, more than comfortable, but it wasn't the defining feature of our relationship. What mattered was his kindness, his unwavering support, his quiet joy in simple things. Watching the sunset over the Algiers ferry, sharing satsumas peeled on my tiny back porch, his hand finding mine during a walk. He valued my opinions, encouraged my tentative steps back into the art world. I volunteer curate small shows at the gallery now, and celebrated my growing independence. When he asked me to marry him, overlooking the twinkling lights of the city from the hot tin rooftop bar nearly a year after we met, it wasn't about replacing what I'd lost. It was about building something new, something genuine, on solid ground. We married 6 months ago, not a grand society affair like my first wedding, but an intimate gathering of close friends and family in the courtyard of a French Quarter hotel, complete with a small jazz trio playing softly. Genevieve cried, Simone Dubois actually smiled, and even my kids, seeing me truly happy and cherished, seemed lighter, relieved. Charles's quiet generosity has eased the financial anxieties that once haunted me, but more than that, his love and respect have been the true restoration project, healing cracks I didn't even know ran so deep. Life isn't perfect, whose is, but it's real, grounded, filled with a quiet contentment I never thought possible. And Benjamin? The whispers haven't stopped, though they've faded. Moreau Shipping is a memory, swallowed by a larger, impersonal conglomerate. The last I heard, through Jen, who'd run into an old acquaintance, he's still rattling around that condo, alone. Apparently his health isn't great, the years of heavy drinking and stress taking their toll. The charm is gone, replaced by a bitterness that isolates him further. I saw him once, across Jackson Square. He was sitting on a bench, staring blankly at the street performers, looking older, smaller, profoundly alone. He didn't see me. I felt a pang, not of anger anymore, but of a distant, detached pity. A man who threw away everything chasing fools, gold, only to find himself bankrupt in every way that mattered. He chose his path. Sometimes, standing on my balcony, breathing in the sweet scent of night-blooming jasmine mixed with the faint aroma of beignets from down the street, I think about that thick, heavy humidity I used to feel weighing me down. It's still there, of course. It's New Orleans, but it doesn't feel suffocating anymore. It feels like life, vibrant and complex. I navigated the storm, emerged from the wreckage, and found myself rebuilt, stronger, standing in my own sunshine. Life threw me a hell of a curveball, broke my heart, and tested my limits. But it also surprised me with unexpected grace, second, chances, and the quiet serenity of finding love when I least expected it, with a man who values the real me, not some gilded illusion. Turns out, even after 50, your own personal Mardi Gras parade, your own second line celebrating resilience, can still come marching through. That's my story, or at least this chapter of it. It wasn't easy, and there were days I didn't think I'd make it through. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What would you have done in my situation? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to hear more stories like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out.